The next step is going to be attaching the ribbons to the inside liner of the skirt. So we're going to also safety pin the back on. I like to begin with the rings that are on the seams. So I'm going to go from the side here. So I like to go one side to the other side, that way it's easier. And I just do all the ones that are on the seams first, and then I follow and I go in between the seams. So in between every seam, I have 2 or 3 rings depending on the spacing. Over here I have 1, over here I have 2, because if I did just 1 in the center here, that's going to be a lot of fabric for how low the skirt is on the floor, so close to her legs. So normally I put the amount of safety pins on the skirt as however many rings I want for the bottom. If you are uncertain, then just ask. So I'm going to begin here, and I use the pins first, and then I safety pin everything once I'm sure. So I make sure that I fold it on the safety pin, and we already know that this is correct because we checked it. And I like to make sure that it is at the bottom of the safety pin, that it's not actually where I poked it through, just to give myself that extra bit of security. Also, girls tend to like it a little bit on the longer side. So I'll just pin it like this and move on to the next one. Ideally, you would want to make sure that your safety pins are pinned through all of the layers. I thought mine were, but sometimes you miss one. Because now you can just pull it. Make sure, of course, that you don't have any bubbles underneath here. I'm going to align it here. Align the seam with the seam at the top. And then pin it like so. So that way when there's gravity on it, it's going to be exactly the same length. Moving on to the next one. And now for the fabric in between the seams, the part here where it blends into the front, where the train blends into the front hem, I normally put safety pins here, because if I put a ribbon in here and it's going to be so far on the bottom, it's going to be sticking out the bottom, so snaps look more discreet and a little bit better in this case. So I'm going to begin past the first seam over here, and I'm going to worry about the transition later. So here is how it looks. So over here, the reason why I put 2 is because we want it to be nice and round on the bottom. If I put just 1 in the middle, see how pointy that is? We don't want that. So the more rings that we attach, the more even the skirt is going to be on the bottom. However, we don't want to overdo it. So this is pretty much the minimum that I would put, because even when it falls, the corner, when she's wearing it, when the skirt falls, the corner of that fold isn't going to create a point on the bottom, just like you saw with the single. So I'll show you one more time. If I put just one connection here, in between the 2 seams that I have. Once that's up, first of all, it's not very straight on the bottom, and second of all, there's just like big flop of fabric here. So I'll show you now with 2. So I'm kind of putting some tension over here, making sure that's nice and straight, putting some tension over here, and then I'm taking this over, making sure that this is still in a straight line, and putting some tension over here. That way I can have the distance between these 2 kind of perfect. So now when you look at this, behaves a little bit better. You have less of that floppiness. You still have a little bit, that fabric still has to go somewhere, but at least now it's like equidistant and it's a smoother transition on the bottom. So we're just going to continue doing that along the hemline here. So my centerpiece here is huge because it's got this triangular insert. And it has pretty much no seams here. So I have one in the middle and I have two on each side of the middle. And I'm hoping it's going to be enough. It looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to grab the center one. And I'm going to grab my center safety pin here. And I'm going to go about halfway in between the triangular seams here. So I'm going to pull it up as much as I can, putting some tension on there. Because that ribbon is going to be right in the middle here. And then we have two on each side. So we're going to do the same thing, but these ribbons are going to be very close together. So now I'm going to go to the next safety pin, kind of pull on the skirt, make sure there's no slack on the outside layer on the bottom here when I do this, because then the skirt is going to be too long and the bustle is going to be too long. Now I move on to my second point, just making sure that this is nice and rounded, putting some tension on here and going right in between at the top. So here we have all of this fabric distributed. Now I proceed to the other side where I have two rings. So same thing here, roughly symmetrical. For example, here, the same as on the other side, I have two rings, meaning I'll have two ribbons, but I only have one safety pin here pinned. So I need to make sure that that is neatly rounded out and put tension from those points, kind of at a 90-degree angle here. So I can accomplish that neat curve and see where I point this, it really makes a difference in the shape on the bottom. You can notice that when I put it more towards this guy, the curve is smoother on the bottom, so that's what we want. It is important to lay out the skirt on the table or on a very clean floor in order to see exactly where that fabric is distributed and where is the best place to put it. So here I have done all of this in between the seams. And now is where I will safety pin the ribbons. I like to safety pin the ribbons on, then do the bustle, see how it hangs, and then do the snaps, just because then I can make sure that the transition is the most accurate into the hem, just in case something's not right with these safety pins. Even though there should not be, if you wanted to, you can just fold it straight on the pins here, and you might have to do like 3 snaps so it transitions neatly. But from my experience, it's best to do this afterwards. The ribbons will be attached again with the safety pins. And what's going to happen is we're going to lift the top section here, see where our ring is, fold a ribbon in half so it looks nice and pretty on the bottom, and we're going to attach that crease of the ribbon right at the top of the ring, so when it's tied, it's exactly that length. Now the ribbon is going to be attached only through the liner here if you can, so there's nothing going to be visible on the outside of the dress. So then we can just undo this, and this is how it should look. We can string one end through and tie it, because then once we have all of them done, we can go back and double check the length. Here is the inside of our German or Ballroom Bustle. I wanted to show you over here how the fabric is distributed in between each of the connections and how even the fabric is in between. Basically, we want to accomplish this. I want to show you what happens when I remove one. Do you see how much farther this comes down? If my bride takes a step, she can very easily catch her heel on this. So we need to make sure that our spaces in between the rings are not too big. That way the fabric folds don't hang very far down the dress. So they should be pretty high up there, and especially on the side here. This is the reason why we put snaps on the ends. Here are the snaps, and we have no ribbons here that could cause her to fall. And the only thing is, we do have to be careful. She does have to be careful that she doesn't step on these, but they're on the side, so I haven't had issues with that. So here's how the side looks with the snaps attached, so you can also see the equal folds in the fabric on the side. The good thing about this kind of bustle is that the weight of the train is really distributed around the whole back circumference of the train. That way it's not like it's hanging from one central area. The skirt really behaves like a regular dress now, as if the train wasn't even there.